before I start by introducing Andrés, my name's Andrew. I'm one of the organisers of the English workshop, or the legal workshop, along with the lady sitting on the front row, Elena Goritz, who created the whole thing, along with Ángeles Solanes. Just a quick plug for the book that we've released, which is a collection of articles written by the people that have participated so far in the legal workshop. It's called Legal Challenges of the 21st Century, and it has a fine collection of articles in English on the different subjects that were treated in the legal workshop last year. I'm going to go straight on to present Andrés, so you won't be hearing anything more from me. You'll be relieved to know as soon as I've done that. Andrés Boix Palop, if I've pronounced it more or less acceptably, is a lecturer in administrative law here at the University of Valencia. He did his degree in law in 1999. He did his doctorate here in 2003. He's been on, you could call it research leave, at the Sorbonne University in Paris, at the University of Frankfurt in Germany. He speaks English very well, and French very well, and Catalan very well, and German very well, and etc., etc. It's an embarrassment of intellect. He's a specialist in various branches of administrative law, among them telecommunications law, the regulation of telecommunications, media law, the regulation of television stations, radio stations, urban transport regulation, and he's currently in a project which is researching the regulation of financial markets in Spain, and also the different tensions between state law and autonomous law, which is why he's perfectly placed to talk about the problem that we're here to talk about today. That's it from me, thank you very much. I now leave you with Andrés Boix, except to say one thing, that Andrés Boix has a reputation for, an enviable reputation for being clever. I don't mean that, I mean that quite strictly, in the sense that anyone you talk to, whether they agree with his opinions or not, comes to the same conclusion that he's clever. And take that a little, maybe as a warning. In that, if you're going to ask questions, think about what you're going to ask him before, because he's exceptionally bright. Okay? That's it from me. Over to Andrés.
Yes, it's that working. Yes. So thank you. First of all, I have to thank Andrew, not only because of being here after his kind and Elena's kind invitation, but also because of his nice introduction. So thank you both, Elena and Andrew. And also thank you, all of you, for being here. It's really nice to have so much people here today, so thank you. Well, I want to introduce what I am talking about today. I think, well, everyone knows that we are right now, in a full-blown constitutional crisis here in Spain because of the situation in Catalonia. The Catalan Question, as it was named by many scholars, not only now, but also in the past. The Catalan question has always been a question in Spain, and the territorial question, how we share power between the state and the different regions of Spain, has always been a question, a debate, an important debate, when freedom and democracy has appeared in Spain. So that's not new. That's not something happening now. That's happened every single time we have had democracy and freedom in Spain. That happened in the First Republic, that happened in the Second Republic, and that happened also in the transition process from the Francoism regime to the democracy, and it's happening now. So, well, I'm sure you are aware of that, and you know that we are having a constitutional crisis because of the wish of a lot of Catalans. We don't know if a majority, but it's indeed a lot of them. The wish of Catalans of secede from Spain. Well, so we are going to analyze that. We are going to analyze the problem. We are going to see how democracy and legality interacts in relation with that problem, and we're going also to try to explain how the European environment affects or may affect the outcome of this situation. Because the difference between this situation right now and the situation in the past is that nowadays Spain is within the European Union. Spain is fully integrated in a system, in the normal system of Western democracies. So it's not possible to use some remedies that have been used in the past. And that changed a bit the framework that we have. So, first of all, we have to explain the conflict. We have to explain the crisis. And this crisis is really simple to explain. On the one hand, we have the democratic argument. So a lot of people, a lot of Catalans, they want to vote on the question whether Catalonia should remain in Spain or leave. A lot of people consider, at least in Catalonia, that this is a question that should be decided by the vote of the people, the vote of the Catalans. And that's a strong argument if you analyze it. So when organizing how we live, together, to allow people deciding it, to allow people deciding fundamental things on that, it's not a crazy thing. In fact, if we live in a democracy, the fundamental idea of democracy is to do exactly that, to allow people decide the fundamental things that are going to affect our lives. So that's one hand of the argument. But on the other hand, we have the idea of rule of law, as expressed in German, the Rechtsstaat. The idea that we live in a democracy, but we also live in a state in which we have rules. And these rules has to be followed. In Spain, we have the Spanish Constitution. You see there the official document of the Spanish Constitution. And the Spanish Constitution is the bunch of fundamental norms and principles that explains how democracy has to find its way in the Spanish legal system. In fact, those two principles, democracy and rule of law, have already been in conflict. The history of revolutions, the history of democracy is also a history in which we have always been the fight, the contrast between those two principles. But those two principles has also to be together. We need them to be together. We need to conciliate them. In fact, the first Declaration of Rights, of Human Rights, I am sure you know it, the first Declaration of Human Rights with a pretension of universality is the French Declaration of 1789. In this Declaration of Rights, Article 16 of that declaration said that no country can claim it has a constitution without a respect of fundamental rights and also a respect of separation of powers. And the idea behind that is that in order to have a constitution, so the rule of law, you need not only some norms to be followed, some rules to be followed, but also some principles to be respected, which are democracy, sovereignty of the people, separation of powers, and also the respect of fundamental rights. So that's an whole idea. We have to conciliate democracy with the rule of law. Without democracy, the rule of law means nothing. Well, it means an authoritarian state. But democracy has to be channeled, has to follow some paths. And that's the problem we have now. Because, at least for the moment, the paths that are being followed by the Catalan government and by the Catalan majority are in clear breach with the Spanish law, with the Spanish constitution. They are trying to achieve the independence of Catalonia, but they are doing that in breach with our legal regime, in breach with the Spanish constitution. And that, I think, from a legal point of view, cannot be disputable, cannot be questioned. It's clear. It's in clear breach. The problem is whether or not this breach is a legitimate one, which is another question. And that's the question I am going to try to address. In order to do that, I want you to remind that the situation that we face now in Catalonia is not an exceptional one. We have a lot of examples of countries declaring their secession to former unions. We have a lot of examples of that using war. We have a lot of examples of that in the turmoil of political situations that were complicated, for instance, in the dissolution of the former Soviet Union, for instance, in the dissolution of Yugoslavia. So we have a lot of examples, also in Europe, also in the 20th century, even in the 21st century, even in these first 2 decades of the 21st century, we have some examples, not in Europe, but for instance in Africa. So that's not something exceptional. That's a normal thing. That happens. And it happens also using democratic ways. It happened also using the vote of the people. That has happened when the problem has been faced by a Western democracy. The normal reaction in a Western democracy, when a majority of people of one particular region wanted to secede, wanted to vote on a secession issue, and this majority was clearly established, has been to allow the vote. Here I have 3 major examples of that. The first one is Norway. Norway voted in 1905 in order to secede from Denmark. Well, it was a century ago, so it's an old example, but it was a normal one. So more or less Denmark was a democracy already in 1905, so it was impossible to stop the vote, because the willing of the people was considered to be essential. So they allowed the vote, and Norway seceded. The second example is a most recent one, is the example of Quebec. Quebec has made 2 different referendums in 1980 and 1995. In those 2 referendums were made because of the majority of the parliament in Quebec wanted to, and those 2 referendums were made without the agreement of the Canadian government. The Canadian government didn't agree on the referendum, but the Canadian government didn't stop them. Canada allowed those 2 referendums to be made, and they were made without problems, without conflicts. In both cases, the result was that a majority of people in Quebec wanted to stay in Canada. So Quebec is still part of Canada. But that was a way to solve the conflict using peaceful ways. And in Quebec, they voted, the problem was over, at least for some years, and they have succeeded in continuing together and continuing living together without many political problems. Why? Because once you vote, the question is more or less clear. Well, we accept the result of the majority, the problem is solved, at least for the moment, which is not a bad thing, at least in my opinion. The third example, as you may guess, is the Scottish referendum. that was made in 2014. And, well, the result was also a no. The result was also to remain within the United Kingdom. The majority was 10 points majority. And the result has also been that the question has been solved, at least for the moment, at least for some years. It may change if Brexit changes the situation, but for the moment, well, it's a way to solve the problem. So what I intended to explain here is that this situation is not an extraordinary situation. This situation has happened a lot. This situation also happens in Western democracies. It's not a normal thing, because a Western democracy has the capacity to offer things to people in order to make them happy, so the wish to live is not so big, but it may happen. And when that kind of things happen in a Western democracy, the normal way to solve it is to vote. And that has been the case. In every case, we have faced a majority of people in a region, in a particular region of a country, willing to secede. Well, that is a bad example for Spain. That is a bad example for Spain, because if a situation like the current situation we face in Catalonia has been solved in other Western democracies by allowing the vote, and the Spanish government doesn't want to, so we have maybe a problem, because the precedent doesn't help the Spanish government. But what happens with international law? Can international law come to the rescue of the Spanish government? Well, in fact, not, because it is clear that international law doesn't accept secession, doesn't give a path to do it, doesn't give a way, doesn't offer a right to do it in a situation like the Catalan situation. Because, as you know, United Nations has stated that some peoples, some regions have a right of self-determination, but only if there are a situation of colonization, of if there are a big problem with fundamental rights. In those cases, there's a right of self-determination, but that's not the case in Catalonia. I think we can all agree on that. But because Spain is a normal democracy, and a democracy in which fundamental rights are granted and respected. Of course, we have problems, but we have a judiciary system that is there in order to protect people and protect the rights of people. So we cannot say that Spain is in a situation in which the United Nations self-determination right could apply. But on the other hand, international law has also said that even though you don't have a path, you don't have a legal way to obtain independence, in a case like the Catalan case, if you succeed in winning your independence, international law is going to respect that. And that was decided by the International Court of Justice in the case of Kosovo. And we have this Kosovo decision, which is really important, because it's a decision in which it is clearly stated that self-determination was not allowed for Kosovo under UN regulations, UN resolutions, but once secession was achieved, international law has to respect that. I've chosen this pic with the logo of the NATO, because it's clear that Kosovo is not the same as Catalonia, because it's clear that Kosovo's secession was achieved with the help of a very important and powerful organization, military organization, such as NATO. So, of course, the Kosovo precedent is important in order to understand how international law functions, but it's not a precedent for the Catalonia situation, that's clear. No? But the important thing is that international law has a realistic approach to independence. Once independence has occurred, independence has to be considered as a matter of fact. Even in cases in which they don't recognize the independence. Kosovo's independence has been recognized. But even in cases like, for instance, Crimea, even in Crimea, international law, in this case, that's the difference with Kosovo, in this case, international law doesn't accept the referendum that was made in Crimea. But as a matter of fact, Crimea, it's part of Russia today. And international law, for instance, has to consider the Russian authorities responsible of the situation in Crimea. If there's some breach on fundamental rights in Crimea, international law will consider Russia, the Russian Federation, responsible of that, and not other country. So international law is not a very big help for the Spanish government. Well, that was my introduction. And now I want to consider how could things come to such a pass? How is possible that we are in a situation like the situation we face? How is possible that the constitutional system in Spain has not offered any solution to the Catalan demands? And in order to do that, I think it's interesting to analyze the different phases of the conflict. I am going to do that quickly, but I am going to do that referring to the different constitutional solutions to the different Catalan demands, because it's interesting to know how our constitutional system, how our institutions, how the Spanish government and the Spanish Constitutional Court have reacted in these different phases of the problem. The first one is the new Catalan Institute, 2006. In those times, 10 years ago, Catalan institutions, Catalan citizens, Catalan majorities didn't want to leave Spain. They only want to have bigger powers, bigger regional powers, and even more important than that, they wanted those powers to be protected, to be shielded from future decisions from the Spanish authorities and from further decisions of the Constitutional Court. Well, this attempt to have bigger powers and to have those powers shielded from a legal perspective was broken down by the Constitutional Court, the Spanish Constitutional Court, in this decision, in his decision 31, 2010. And, well, that was the beginning of the crisis. Because after that, so the message that the Catalan citizens and the Catalan nationalist parties received from that decision of the Spanish Constitutional Court was, there is no way within the constitutional system for Catalonia to increase their regional powers. There's no way, because the Constitutional Court said that within the frame of our constitution, you cannot wait for more powers or for a bigger shielding of the current powers you have. So that was the first phase. After this decision, the Catalan institutions, the Catalan government, the Catalan majority, tried another approach. They tried the same approach that has been the approach of the Basque country. They said, well, we have no possibility of shielding our powers within the constitutional framework. We are trying to shield our powers by a de facto solution. How? Having a new financial agreement that allows us to have more money and to have more control of the wealth of Catalonia. That has been accepted in Spain, and that has been accepted in the Spanish Constitution for the Basque country. But the Catalans made such a request in 2012, and the answer of the Spanish government and the Spanish major parties, both Partido Popular and Partido Socialista, both of them answered, no, that's not possible. The situation of the Basque country is an exception. We are not going to extend that. We are not going to extend that because we consider that's a bad solution, because we consider that's a privilege that should not be extended to other people in Spain. So we are not going to accept your request of a new financial agreement. It has to be said that this answer was made in the middle of a very heavy economic crisis. So the request was made in 2012, so it was straight in the middle of a very heavy economic crisis. So the room of maneuver the government in Spain had was really scarce. Would have been the answer a different one in other economic situations? We don't know. What we know is that the answer was no. The answer was that's impossible. But we also know that the answer was given in such a context. So I think it's fair to note out that. After that, so no to the new Statute of Autonomy, no to a new financial agreement. After two first attempts, the phase 3 of the conflict was the Catalans saying, well, if it's not possible to have a new statute, if it's not possible to have a new financial agreement, then we want at least to have the opportunity to leave Spain. And we want the people of Catalonia to be asked for. They offer to the Spanish government the possibility to make a referendum after an agreement between the Catalan authorities and the Spanish authorities. It was 2013. If you see, it was exactly at the same time the Scottish government was reaching an agreement with the United Kingdom in order to have their referendum. But the answer here in Spain was different. The answer here in Spain was no, we cannot do that. The answer was an answer shared also this time with both parties, not only the government, the Popular Party, but also the Socialist Party in the opposition. They agreed in the answer they gave to the Catalans representatives. And the answer was, no, we don't want to, but also we cannot offer you this possibility. So we don't want, we think it's a bad idea, but even if we thought that's not a bad idea, that's a good idea, we cannot, because the Spanish Constitution forbids such a referendum. And they offer an explanation based on Articles 92.1, 92.2 of the Spanish Constitution, because in those articles, referendums are stated to be made only if we ask all the population, not a part of the population, not a part of the Spanish population, but all the population. This article could be interpreted in another way. We can read it in another way. Some scholars have do it. For instance, Rubio Llorente, which is a leading constitutional professor. But the majority of our scholars and also our constitutional court in a previous decision, 103/2008, has always stated, our constitutional court has always stated that, in fact, our constitution doesn't allow such a referendum because of the regulation of Article 92, but also because of the idea of the unity of Spain, Article 1.2 and Article 2 of our constitution. So our constitutional court says this referendum is impossible. In fact, 3 days ago, in a new decision, our constitutional court has once again said this referendum is impossible within our constitutional framework. So, Catalans asked for an agreement on a referendum. The answer was no, we don't want to, we consider that a bad idea, but also it's impossible within the constitution, the Spanish Constitution of 1978. So after that, Catalans tried another approach. In this case, the approach was, well, we are going to use Article 92 of our Constitution. Article 92 of our Constitution says that referendums should be approved by the state and should be asked to every citizen in Spain, but also say that there are other ways to consult people. And these ways to consult people are ways that are not controlled by the state, but are also in the realm of the jurisdiction of autonomous communities. For instance, the Catalan Institute of Autonomy has claimed the possibility for the Catalan government to create such a participation process in which the population is asked to give its opinion, but not using a referendum. In order to do that, the Catalan government passed a bill on that, and called for not for a referendum, they called for a participation process, which was made on the 9th of November 2014. This participative process was also deemed unconstitutional by our Constitutional Court. Because our Constitutional Court said that even if it was implemented as a participative process, in fact, it was too similar to a referendum, so it was unconstitutional, because it was too similar. The Constitutional Court didn't accept that there were enough differences to allow such a participative process. They consider, in fact, it's like a referendum, so you cannot do that. Why? Because of the previous reasons. Do you follow me? So that was 2014. After that, well, as you know, the Catalan government did this participative process, but not using legal and government ways, but using some private associations. So they made more or less the vote, and it was the first attempt to make a vote. After that, the Catalan government said, well, if we don't have another opportunity to give people the voice, we are going to do that using elections, a normal election. So they called for a snap election, and this snap election was said to be an election on the issue of independence. At least some parties considered that election in that way. Other parties thought that this election was a normal election. And they said, we are going to participate in a normal election. We don't accept that this election is only on the independence. So, some parties considered that, other parties didn't. In fact, the result of the elections were a win for the secessionist parties. They achieved an absolute majority of seats in the Catalan parliament, but they fell short of a majority of the vote. They reached a 48% of the vote. So they didn't have an absolute majority of the citizens' vote. Parties that have claimed they were against independence reached more or less 39–40% of the vote. And other parties that have stated, we are not for the independence, but we are not against independence, and we don't want to be counted in one of those two groups, reach 12% of the vote. So, with that situation, the nationalist majority didn't want to declare independence. Why? Because they consider that with only 48% of the vote, of the citizens' vote, they didn't have enough legitimacy to do that. Instead of that, they began this process that has led us to the vote on October the 1st. Instead of doing that, they said, well, we have a majority in the Catalan parliament, we are going to make a vote. But the difference, and that's a very big difference, is that this time, all the proceedings and all the referendum bills that have been passed in the Catalan parliament are in breach with the Spanish legality. Why? And that's the big difference, because they consider the Spanish legality has not offered a viable path to do that after those attempts, and they also consider they have a popular mandate and the legitimacy to do that because of the vote in the snap elections of 2015. So they have passed those bills in clear breach with our constitutional legality, and that has produced a reaction of the Spanish authorities, a reaction of our constitutional court. First of all, they suspend those bills. After that, 3 days ago, they have considered those bills unconstitutional. We have also a reaction using ordinary legal ways, the ordinary powers of ordinary judges, using police forces. But the main problem is that all those reactions has created bigger problems in Catalonia, because the Spanish government right now has at least a problem of legitimacy in Catalonia. Having offered viable solutions to the Catalan democratic claims within the Spanish legal framework, the position of the Spanish institutions and the Spanish constitution is badly weakened. Why? Because if you don't offer a way, a viable way, a legal way to give path to these democratic claims, that undermines the legitimacy of your system. Because as we have stated previously, we have to combine democracy with the rule of law. One of them alone doesn't work. We need to combine them. And the Spanish system has failed to combine that. The only reaction to this breach has been no negotiation, has been the using of ordinary remedies, constitutional remedies, and the use even of police forces in order to prohibit meetings, political meetings, in order to prohibit the delivery of mailing with ads, with advertising. They have also prohibited the referendum, and that's the phase 7, the referendum. We had a referendum. I am not going to explain to you what we had the 1st of October. We had a referendum. Catalan institutions, in breach with the Spanish legality, tried to do that, and the Spanish government tried to impeach the vote to be made. We have seen a lot of scenes of state violence, a state legitimate answer to the referendum that was in breach with the constitution. And the fact is that they succeed in create a framework in which the referendum, it was impossible to be made in normal conditions. But even in those conditions, a lot of people voted. We don't know exactly how many votes were casted. Why? We don't know, because we have to believe what Catalan authorities say. It's hard it's impossible to prove if the claims that more than 2 million people voted are true or not. It's impossible. But it's impossible because of the situation created. Well, and after that, we are in the situation we face now. Catalan authorities want to declare independence. In fact, we don't know if they have already made it or not, but it's not important. It's not an important thing. If they have not, it's more or less clear that they are going to, because the answer of the state is, you cannot do that. I am not going to accept any option which is not you abort your intentions of independence. And that's the situation. I think it's fair to say that Catalan authorities and Catalan independence parties have tried a lot of different paths in order to let people express by themselves. I think it's also fair to say that the final way they have used is in clear breach with the Spanish constitution. I think it's also clear that we face a problem which is not a legal one, but a political one. And starting over, we are like at the beginning of this speech. We have people wanting to vote, a lot of people wanting to vote. That's a queue in one of the electoral colleges on the 1 October. We have people wanting to vote. And on democracy, so an idea of democracy saying people has to express their opinion. And on the other hand, we have a state saying, I am not going to allow that. Our constitution doesn't accept that. It's not possible. It's not any possible path to do that. We don't accept that. And we are going to use every mean we have, even violence, legitimate violence under the Spanish constitutional system. Even we are going to take away polls. No, that's an image that I consider even more striking than the images of police violence on the 1st October. We have here police they are
balaclavas.
What?
Becoming a fit balaclavas.
Yes. What was
balaclavas?
So they are like in a commando action in order to take away polls from people, in order to prevent people doing such a dangerous activity as to cast a ballot in a poll. And that's a very striking image. And that's why the position of the Spanish government is difficult to defend, and it's difficult to defend in the European environment. Because where's the violence? Where's the gravity of doing that? Where's the gravity of doing a long queue in order to cast a ballot? Where's the problem? So, we have here a political problem. Because if we have to assess this situation using legal tools, a lot of colleagues of mine, a lot of scholars, of Spanish scholars, have said we are clear in a situation of a coup d'etat, of a putsch, using no violence, using other ways, using polls, a putsch using polls, but we are in a putsch. Why? Because we have authorities saying they want to leave Spain and they are not respecting Spanish legal order. And we can try to address that using legal tools. But that's a mistake, in my opinion. And I am going here to invoke the authority of Kelsen. Do you know Kelsen? Hans Kelsen, I guess. Kelsen, no, the major jurist of the 20th century. Well, Kelsen explained, and Kelsen was considered to be a legalist. So, in fact, he's a positivist. And Kelsen explained in his general theory of law and state what's the difference between a coup d'etat and a revolution. What's the difference between a coup d'etat, which is a breach of legality and has to be punished, and a revolution, which is a happy event in which everybody is going to be considered a hero. And the only difference that Kelsen found is that a coup d'etat is a situation in which someone claims legality has not to be followed because there's another way to legitimate actions that fail. If you fail, that's a coup d'etat. And revolution is exactly the same situation if you win. So the question here is that the Spanish constitutional system is under a big crisis, but we have to bear in mind that the principle of legitimacy is restricted by the principle of effectiveness of the Constitution. If Catalan authorities achieve to have a different legal system which is effective instead of the Spanish system, they are not going to be punished because of a coup d'etat. They are going to be considered heroes of a revolution, of a successful revolution. And that's why legal tools are not so essential to solve this conflict. This conflict is a political one, and it has to be solved using political solutions. So I want to finish trying to offer some possible solutions. I want to finish trying to explain why our system and also our legal and constitutional system has to react, or should react, offering solutions that are acceptable in the context of the European Union, and also acceptable for Catalans and for a majority of people in Spain in order to solve a problem using democratic ways. Three main ideas in order to do that. First one, I think we should look at the European mirror. I think we should look for European precedents. I think we should try to respect democratic principles. It's not possible to find a solution to this crisis if we do not accept to use democratic solutions. It's impossible. It's simply impossible. I think that the solution to the current Spanish constitutional crisis would require, in any case, a significant softening in this rigid understanding that we have explained, that I have explained to you, of the unity principle in our Constitution. If not, we are not going to solve the problem. I think it's essential to give a way, to give a legal path to Catalan citizens to express themselves on the issue, to have the opportunity to vote, because if not, we are not going to solve the problem. That's how any Western democracy that have faced such a problem has solved it. And I think we should copy this solution. Also, because it's the more democratic one. We think, second idea, that we should defend our constitution without violating the constitution. One problem we are facing right now, and is going to be even worse in the future, I fear, is that the Spanish government is using some legal tools offered by the Spanish constitution and offered by the Spanish legal regime, trying to use them, expanding the normal boundaries of these tools, thus creating a problem, because we are seeing things that are not normal, even using the Spanish constitutional standards. A lot of international organizations have already alarmed about the use of those tools. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, but also even the European Parliament has said that in Spain we have to respect the Spanish constitutional order, but we have to call for dialogue, and also we have to respect fundamental rights. So it's not only something I am saying, it's something a lot of international organizations focused on the respect of fundamental rights, and also the European Parliament have already said, because that's a very important thing, and we have the risk to create a legal answer in the wake of the classical Carl Schmitt way. Carl Schmitt was a very intelligent, a very clever jurist, German jurist, that was aligned with the Nazi regime. And one of the most important books of Carl Schmitt is a book on how we should defend the Constitution when the Constitution is under attack. And Carl Schmitt said that the defense of the Constitution is so important that we are allowed, and we can, in order to defend the Constitution, even forget the Constitution and answer with other means. Because Carl Schmitt considered that justified because of the risk we face when someone is in breach with our legal system and with our Constitution. Well, I fear that a lot of Spanish scholars are now using this logic, the Schmitt logic. We are under so big threat that even our Constitution is not so important. In order to defend our Constitution, we have to violate most of the fundamental principles and ideas in our Constitution. So I think, second main idea, we have the duty, we have the obligation, every citizen in Spain has the obligation to ask, to defend our Constitution, saying to our government, you cannot do that if you are not within the boundaries, within the normal boundaries of our legal system. And third idea, last idea, we need a more flexible constitutional approach. We need to change the way in we think our Constitution. Maybe we need to change our Constitution, which is a very difficult path to follow, but we need to change the way in which we understand our Constitution. We have to accept that Catalans have to vote, and we have to accept that this has to be solved using democratic ways, democratic procedures, and we have to accept it as a normal thing, as a thing that has happened in other countries and is going to happen in Spain. In some way, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I am sure Catalans are going to vote on that. We have to accept that. The sooner we accept it, the better we will solve the problem. A lot of scholars, not a majority, but a lot of them, for instance, Rubio Llorente, as I have already said, has considered that there's not a big constitutional problem if we want to hold a referendum. But even if there's a problem, there's always the possibility to look for different ways to do it. So maybe using the tool of the constitutional reform, maybe combining that with a Catalan referendum. I don't know why. It's not important how we do it. The important thing is that we have to do it. We have to find a way to protect our democracy, protect our constitution, and doing that, allowing people to express their wishes in a democratic way. And that was more or less what I wanted to explain to you. As you have seen, that final point is my opinion, is my idea on how we have to solve the problem. Of course, you don't have to agree with that. It's only my opinion. But I have explained that to you because I think it's a sensible opinion. That's why it's mine. And because I think there are arguments in order to defend that. And also because I think it would be a way to solve this problem without the danger that we face now, which is that this problem is going to be solved using not democratic ways, but other ways. And, well, I would prefer not to see that because of so many reasons. That was all. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrés. I think that we should take some questions. If you'd like to put your hand up, then I'll indicate the people to answer the questions. I've noticed something, that when I point to someone, for some bizarre reason, the person behind them normally answers, thinking that I'm speaking to them. So I'll perhaps describe the person that I want to answer the question if you're staying close together, trying to use a flattering means of description, of course. But if we could start, Elena, do you have a question?
Well, just two quick questions. First of all, congratulations for your excellent lecture. Well, I don't want to finish with all the questions because for sure many people have different questions. But one of them is, you initially said that there is kind of clash between democracy and rule of law. And you assume that democracy is to vote whatever you want, more or less. More or less. I'm going to give you a ridiculous example. I'm going to give you an example. In the last Spanish poll, some green parties proposed that if they win, they will want to propose a referendum about the possibility of bringing pets, domestic animals, on public media. This is another idea for a referendum. So, first question, should we vote anything? And should we vote anything that whoever wants? This is one question. To consider that our system is democratic? Okay. This is one question. The second question would be, you have proposed us some solutions or some ways of solutions or some guidelines to get a solution or whatever. I think there is one thing that neither the state nor the Catalan government got, which is to reach an agreement about some questions of a referendum. Nobody tried to do that. Nobody. Of course, it should be made behind the scenes. It's never going to happen publicly. But at least behind the scenes, nobody tried. Why? And finally, you propose flexible interpretation of the Constitution. Why not a reform of the Constitution? And that's all. Sorry for me.
So, trying to address that, those three really interesting questions quickly. First, the first one. I don't say that democracy is to vote always, everything, and only to vote. I have said that we have to combine rule of law and the respect of the established ways to express your opinion with the idea of democracy. We need both. We need a way to do that, but also we need to respect that people's wishes should be heard. So when you have a majority of citizens saying, a majority of we don't know if we have a majority of citizens in Catalonia. No, we don't know if we have a majority of citizens in Catalonia willing to be independent. We don't know that because we don't allow them to vote. That's the first reason we don't know that. But we do know that a broad majority of Catalans want to vote the issue, which is a very important thing. We don't know if a majority of Catalans want to be independent, but we do know that a majority of Catalans want to vote the issue. According to every poll, among 70% and 80% of Catalans want to. And in the last three elections in Catalonia, the political parties wanting to have a vote have always reached at least 2/3 of the seats in the Catalan parliament. So it's a broad majority. When you have once and again, for years, a majority of the people and a majority of their representatives saying we want that, a democracy has to respond. A democracy has to offer a way to do that. Because if not, we have a rule of law that of course is very important and we have to respect that, which is offering no path to do that. And then we have a problem. Because in that case, the democracy is hard. Second question. I didn't remember.
Why there was not an agreement?
Yes, an agreement. We don't have an agreement. Yes. We don't have an agreement because the Spanish government has refused every single attempt. We have explained the different attempts, and the answer has always been no. No, no, no. So it's difficult to have an agreement when someone always says no. But why I think an agreement is possible on a referendum? Because a referendum is the only possible solution that makes no one to win for the moment. If we accept a referendum, the independentist Catalan parties, they have not already won. Because they have to win the referendum in order to be independent. And the Spanish system that wants Catalonia to remain in Spain has not already lost. Because if the referendum is won by the people wanting to stay in Spain, so a referendum has this big advantage. The advantage that holds a bit the solution, and we don't know who's going to win. So you have still the possibility to win or lose, and that's a good room of maneuver for every part. So.
Other referendums, they have the common, even the Canadian referendum, the Scottish referendum, they agree about some questions because this is the key issue.
Yes, but the question here, the problem here is not the question. The problem here is to accept to have the referendum or not. And the third question was why I prefer to softening the reading of our constitution than a constitutional reform. I prefer that because I think it's a more viable option. It's a far more easy way to do that. For instance, in order to accept the homosexual marriage, it was possible to change our constitution, but it was more difficult. It was easier simply to change the way in which we think our constitution. And that's why, because constitution change. Every constitution change. And every constitution means what a majority of the people consider that it means at any moment, and what the Constitutional Court consider that it means at every moment. So it's easier. I am really skeptical about the possibility of a constitutional reform right now in Spain, because a lot of reasons. But to do it quickly, why I prefer a softening, because I think it's far more easy to reach an agreement on that than to reach an agreement on a constitutional reform.
Okay, we have two constitutional law experts sitting over there in the corner. I think at least one of them would like to ask a question.
Yeah, well, I have three discrepancies regarding the bottom line of your presentation, which obviously affect the consequences or the conclusions of your presentation. The first discrepancy has to do with the way you are identifying the actors in this debate. If you listen to yourself, and then if you listen to the recording of your lecture, you will find yourself referring to the Catalan people quite frequently, and in front of the Catalan people, the Spanish institutions, the Spanish party, or the Spanish state. Sorry, the Spanish institutions are as democratic as the Catalan people is, and the Catalan people is as represented by the institutions as the Spanish people is. So we may either confront the Catalan and the Spanish institutions, the Catalan Parliament and the Congress of Deputies, the Catalan government and La Moncloa, or we may confront the Catalan people and the Spanish people that stands behind these institutions. When you confront the people with the state, it looks like that we have a kind of anti-democratic state apparatus pressing on a free people, which is certainly not the case. So that's my first concern. The second concern, you have been describing the history of the Catalan and Spanish conflict for the last 10 years, basically enumerating a number of options that the Catalan government and institutions have pushed for, and enumerating the response of the Spanish institutions to these options, which has been no, 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 and no. Again, listening to your presentation, it looks like the Catalan government has pushed every lever, has tried to open any possible door, but the Spanish institutions have said no to any possible option, which is not the case. I mean, all these options go in the same direction and they form part of a similar strategy. We want a new statute. When we get a new statute, we want sovereignty. When we get sovereignty, we want to vote, and we want to vote when we want independence. So everything goes in the same direction, and it's not a casual consequence. I mean, it's a well-known and a well-planned strategy. The government and Spanish institutions have said once and for all, no. No to all the concretions, to all the materializations of this strategy. Obviously, if the strategy went in another direction, the response would be otherwise, but it is not the case. And my third concern, which is the most basic one, is that you depart in your presentation from a free legal, which means ideological, identification of the subjects in conflict. Catalan people versus the Spanish people, Catalonia versus Spain. And I don't agree with that identification of the subjects. I mean, I'm Spanish, and I consider Catalans part of the Spanish nation I belong to. So I don't identify me as a part of the Spanish nation versus the Catalans as a different entity with which I have a conflict. In the same manner as Catalans would not identify people from Barcelona, or people in Barcelona will identify people from Hospitalet de Llobregat as a different political subject. If you try to talk about a problem between Catalonia and Hospitalet de Llobregat, we'll probably say, hey, I mean, there was not a confrontation, Hospitalet is part of Catalonia. Okay, I do the same, or I say the same regarding Spain. I don't agree with that individualization of the subjects. Catalans are certainly a part of Spain. They certainly have a distinctiveness. They certainly have a right to self-government, but this right to self-government has limits in the Spanish constitution, in the Spanish law, and by the will of the Spanish people. So this confrontation of us against you certainly does not much. And a final remark. You have been talking about rights, about violation of rights. You know, rights are many in our constitution. And so far, my perception is that there are many more rights than the right to vote violated in Catalonia. And there are many more people than the civil guard and the police forces violating rights in Catalonia. I mean, you have a government that has spied on their citizens, that has formed a census illegally, that knows data about their citizens, and at this point, who the hell knows all this data? I mean, in whose hands all these poorly cared data have been falling? You have a government that has done away with the independence of the judiciary. I mean, look at the provisional constitution, or look at the law on the referendum. Where was the division of powers? There was a single article in this law on the referendum saying, hey, all this process is going to be checked by the courts, by independent courts. Not at all. I mean, the independence of justice, the individual rights, the right to privacy, even the right to vote in a neutral manner before an independent committee under the surveillance of an independent court has been violated. Even voting rights have been violated, not only by the police who was preventing people from putting papers in the ballot box, but by those institutions, unknown institutions, secret institutions that have been carrying out a vote counting that has absolutely no guarantee. We should take care of all the rights of all the Catalan citizens.
Thank you, Carlos. That's very interesting remarks. I am trying to address them. So the first one, it was a problem of how I express. So, but maybe I did it badly. But I agree. I fully agree with you. It's clear that we have Catalan institutions and Spanish institutions. In fact, I've tried to outline that the answer of the Spanish government and the Constitutional Court was shared by a broad majority of Spanish political parties and Spanish political actors. So, I think I have said that one or twice because I think it's really important. Yes, and of course we have to assume that that's the normal way that this broad majority of political actors in Spain, the Popular Party and the Socialist Party, are also representing people. So I have no doubts about that. So we agree on that. So, and I also try to explain that the Catalan secessionist parties are a part of the Catalan institutions, and I have also explained that they fell short majority. So it's clear that we agree on that. So the second question, you said that in fact Catalan secessionists and Catalan majorities have not pushed effectively all the possible alternatives. Well, I disagree on that. Well, they have exhausted the alternatives if they wanted to vote. Of course, there are other alternatives in which a vote is not possible. But they have tried to do it with using different ways. A binding referendum, a non-binding referendum, a consultative process. So they have tried a lot. But of course, for them, it's important to vote because they consider they have a right to vote. There's only one alternative in which a vote is concerned that they may not have pushed, which is the constitutional reform. But I think that alternative is problematic because a lot of reasons. In the paper that in the paper I wrote that you have there, I explained why constitutional reform is not a viable alternative for them. But well, it could be one possibility. It could be one possibility. Of course, there's always other possibilities to see. I don't know exactly in which alternative you are thinking of, but I consider, it's my opinion, they have at least tried to do it in different ways, and they have offered different solutions. So, well, in my opinion, we have seen a very rigid answer from the Spanish institutions representing the Spanish population. That's my opinion. But so we don't agree on that. In the first one we agree, but in the second one we don't. And I also do not agree with you about the third question, because you asked me why you consider Catalans a different subject or a different political actor, because they are. In fact, they are. So that's a question of reality. Catalans and the Catalan citizens and Catalan majorities and Catalan populations and Catalan representatives, years after years, they have considered themselves as a political actor. And they have, why they are? Because they are. Because a broad majority of Catalans feel like that way, and that's a reality. we cannot say, well, that reality doesn't exist. That doesn't mean this reality has to lead to one consequence, and only one consequence. We can disagree on the consequence of that, but I think you have to agree with me that that's a fact. That Catalans consider themselves for years, and it's a broad majority of them, and they act and they interact with the state institutions in that way. That's a fact. Which is the consequence of this fact? Of course, we can disagree on that. But I think we have not to forget the fact. And it's an important one. And we have this conflict because of that. If Catalans didn't thought themselves as a different nation, we won't have this problem. We won't have the problem we have. So I think that's a fact. Another thing is how we evaluate the fact. But the fact is they are a different actor. Why? Because they feel like that. And they act like that. And the fourth question, yes, of course. Yes, of course. I agree with you that every single right that has been affected, also by the Catalan government, has to be controlled, and a legal answer has to be done. Why it's not a matter for me? And why it's not a concern for me? Because I'm sure those violations are going to be addressed. Because a broad majority of Spaniards consider they have to, because the legal system considers its obligation to react to them and to protect those rights. So I'm not concerned about that, because I'm sure we are going to see how these problems are addressed. I focus on the other side because in the other side I think a legitimate fear that we won't see exactly the same answer. So, well, in some things I agree with you, in others don't. That's the idea, I think.
All right, okay, listen, because it's 10 to 2, I'm going to take 3 more questions. I've decided that in an autocratic fashion, because my stomach takes precedence over your right to ask a question. Three more questions, and I'll start with the... Well, some people are putting their hands up and down. Can you make up your mind, first of all, if you're going to ask a question? Right. Gentleman with the glasses and the interesting top.
I'm interested regarding...
A loud voice, I'm afraid we don't have microphones.
You mentioned in your speech Kelsen, the jurist Kelsen, and what is the difference between revolution and coup d'etat? And in what a coup d'etat is when someone establishes a legality and they fail, or a revolution is when they do a similar thing succeeding. So I'm concerned about who is establishing this label of succeeding or not. In case of looking at the situations right now, it looks like there is a possible confrontation that is going to happen regarding the application of Article 155 and the resistance to the application by Catalan government. So I imagine that maybe there are 2 legalities going on at the same time. So who is deciding it?
Yes. Reality. The decision, the final decision on whether you succeed or not is given by reality. Have you the actual capacity of controlling the population and the territory that you claim to be yours? In that case, if you actually have the capacity to do that, you have succeeded. That's the idea. So that's why Kelsen said, in those cases, effectiveness prevails over legality. The important thing here is effectiveness. If you achieve to have one of the 2, it's going to be effective at the end, and the other is going not to be. So the one who is going to be effective at the end, the one that is prevailing, de facto prevailing, because of its capacity of the use of means that allow this alternative to prevail, this one is the one who is going to have effectiveness, and therefore after that we are going to assess whether that's a coup d'etat or whether that's a revolution. Is that clear? So it's a question of fact. It's a matter of fact. It's not a legal matter. If we go to a confrontation, our legal system is not important in order to qualify the situation. The situation is going to be qualified because of the de facto result of the confrontation.
Okay, the second question, if you put your hands up, please, whoever wants to ask it. Yes, the gentleman with the beard. Do you have a beard? Well, it looks like a beard.
Go ahead. I'm sure that my question...
Loud voice.
Okay. I'm sure that it's going to sound quite stupid compared with the other ones, but I'm going to try to do my best. What I wanted to ask you is that we assume that as the most democratic option, the option for referendum, and I agree that referendums are one of the best ways to apply democracy. But what level of democracy are we talking about? Because actually our legal system allows us to apply referendums in decisions which are going to affect the whole country. I think that being objective, the separation of Catalonia is going to affect not only social but deeply economically to the whole country. And I feel like if we allow Catalans to take that decision by their own, they are taking me the right to make a decision over a thing that's going to affect me a lot. So,
it's not a silly question. It's a very important one. In fact, it's a question directly related with the question posed by Carlos when he asked me, why do you consider Catalans a different actor? So it's, why? Well, as I have said, I think that in order to find solutions, it's intelligent to look at Western democracy's precedents. And if we look at what Western democracies have done, they have always accepted, they have not even discussed that the vote has to be made regarding only the territory that wants to live. That's the precedent. So that's not the solution. We can discuss it, but that I think gives us a clue that maybe this question is an important one in the Spanish debate, but well, it shouldn't be. But I think it won't be a problem to ask every people in Spain on the issue. If we ask every citizen in Spain on the issue, we will have also the result of Catalonia, which is the important one. So, at least in my opinion, if the best solution is to have a referendum, to have a vote, but a majority of the people in Spain wants also to vote on the referendum, I think it would be a clever solution to say, well, let's do that. Let's accept that Catalans are going to vote, and also everyone in Spain is going to vote. And that result is going to be interesting because we are going to see how many citizens in the rest of Spain accept that. For instance, if you ask me to vote on that referendum, I wouldn't know what to vote, because my answer would be, well, let Catalans decide. So what should I do? To go to the polls and vote yes? No, because I don't want them to live. To not go to the polls? Well, it's a difficult situation for people like me. But I accept that that's a possible solution. Why? Because if we do that, at the end, we will have the result of the will and wishes of the Catalan citizens. And at the end, as a political issue, that would be the most important things. Even if everyone in Spain has voted, we will focus not on what voted the rest of Spain. We will focus on what voted the Catalans, because that's the important thing. So if that's a solution, I will vote yes right now to the solution, because I prefer to solve problems like this and not with other means.
Final question then, please, who would like to ask it? Yes?
Yeah, in your introduction, You didn't really elaborate on the point of like just the justification or the reasoning for the referendum itself. And then
the justification of?
the reasoning of the independence aspiration as a whole, okay? And then you gave examples of Scotland and Catalonia, and then Crimea, Ukraine situation, Russia, etc., and Kosovo, and you can add, I don't know, Kurdish and Palestinians, whatever. I think it's very hard to compare people who has independent inspiration, who deprived of human rights and etc., and Scotland or Catalonia, who are respected and have their rights to vote, welfare, security, etc. I mean, to put them in the same level is, for me, it's a bit far-fetched, and therefore it's interesting for me to know if, as far as you're concerned, you really do care about what are the reasoning for the referendum or not.
So I may have confused you by introducing those examples, because I didn't want to compare that. So in fact, I said that we have to compare the Catalonian situation, and I tried to say it clearly. We have to compare the Catalonian situation with the equivalent examples of situations like this in Western democracies. That's my point. I've used Kosovo and Crimea only because I wanted to explain that international law has a practical approach to the issue. And international law, even in those cases, at the end, simply accepts the situation. Why? Because that's how international law works. But I didn't want to use those examples as an equivalent to the Catalan situation. In fact, it's the contrary. I think the Catalan situation should be analyzed using only as example situations that are more or less similar. A broad majority of the population in a territory of a country willing to vote in a Western democracy. Because if not, we are using examples that are not equivalent. So Western democracies. And that's why I used as an example only Western democracies. And the thing that I consider important is that in every case, a Western democracy has faced that problem, a vote has been made. When we are not in a Western democracy, that has not been the case always. But in Western democracies, each time a clear majority of a regional parliament, not only one time, but one time and another, has claimed they wanted to vote on that issue, a vote has been made. So that's the interesting thing for me. And that answers also your second question. What's my position? My position is that, of course, the sensible solution is for the Spanish institutions, the Spanish constitution, and the Spanish people to accept that the normal thing is to allow the vote and to fight in order to convince a majority of Catalans that we are better together, and to offer a project, a common project, a shared project, in order to build a better Spain, not only for the Catalans, but also for the rest of us. And I am sure it's possible to win the vote on those grounds. I'm sure it's possible to offer changes in the Spanish constitutional system and in the way we analyze and we organize our country. That will be the referendum that will offer the possibility to the people that want Catalonia to stay in Spain to win the referendum. I'm sure it's possible. And that's what I would try. But in order to do that, you have to accept that a referendum is a sensible solution, and also you have to accept that we need a lot of changes in order to improve how we do things. Not only for the Catalans, because if we create or we introduce changes in how we organize, in how we do things in Spain, that would be better not only for them, but also for the rest of us. But that's my view. So I don't know if that's useful for you to know how I think, but that's how I think. And that's what I would make if the decision was mine. If the decision was mine, we will have a referendum. And we will have a bunch of offers and solutions, not only for Catalans, but for all the Spaniards, in order to say, we have such a wonderful country, we have such a wonderful constitution that you won't live, because you would prefer to be with us, because we have a lot to win together.
Okay, I'm getting quite emotional listening to Andrés there. Thank you very much. A very, very interesting talk. Thank you to Andrés. Thank you to the people that asked questions for making the effort to maintain the debate in English, which is not your mother tongue. We appreciate that. And thank you for everyone that's attended today and for your concentration, which I think has been exemplary. And give both Andrés and yourselves, I think, a final round of applause. Before you run away, two things. One, if you wanted to sign the list, make sure you've signed it. Elena has it. Two, just a final plug for the book. Christmas is coming up. Legal Challenges of the 21st Century. My name appears on it, so it must be good. Thank you very much.